Welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Attribution Nation. In this current series, we're stepping into the C-suite to hear directly from CMOs and executives navigating today's most complex marketing challenges. From AI disruption to the age-old alignment battles between marketing and sales, we're going to unpack the real reporting and data problems that leaders are solving and the ones that are still keeping them up at night. So join us for candid conversations that go beyond metrics into the strategies, experiments, and lessons shaping the future of marketing leadership. I am joined today by Reed Hansen, owner and chief growth officer of Market Surge. And we're going to be talking a little bit about how attribution needs evolve from big tech, higher ed, and small business, and what every marketer can learn from that journey. Now, Reed's got a really interesting background bouncing between these different groups, big tech, higher ed, and small business. So we're going to talk a little bit about how his experience has seen that attribution needs change. So Reed, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what Market Search does.
Absolutely. So, like you mentioned, I am the chief growth officer and owner of Market Surge. We're a marketing agency that does all things digital marketing, from SEO, web development, PR, marketing automation, ads management, you name it. I work with a lot of small and medium-sized businesses and help them to a lot of tradesmen and specialists and creatives that got into business to do one thing and wanted less to do with marketing and just have a steady flow of leads so they could really focus on it. So we are the enabler of those professions.
Awesome. So you help the small businesses and entrepreneurs that are, like the foundation of our economy here. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to think so. These tradespeople do great work. Artists, they produce beautiful photographs, and they just really need to be freed up to do what they do best.
I love it. Now, you haven't always been in this line of work. You've kind of bounced around a little bit. You've been with big tech and higher ed, and now you're consulting with small businesses. How did you tell me a little bit about that career journey? Like, how did you kind of make these different changes in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I came out of undergrad, I was just opportunistic. I wanted a job. I was really anxious to start earning money. And one of the first opportunities that opened up was to work in sales at a tech startup. And that startup was, by today's standards, sounds very mundane, but it was pretty revolutionary. We were designing websites for registration for conferences. So, that's pretty standard now, but when we were working with big conferences at the time, it was pretty revolutionary. And so it was really fun to ride the wave of what was a very paper-based type process and replace that with digital technology. And we just really felt like we had a differentiated product and we're just growing really fast and had a lot of fun there. Went to a big company in Oracle, spent several years there, and it was very, very different. That's a very competitive space, very huge tech business to this day. And just the nature of it was very different. And we were trained very on all the minutia of everything in the sales process, all the objections we could possibly consider, all the potential angles we could use to sell and grow our footprint in these client companies. And, I got an MBA. I thought I want to be more in leadership, maybe in strategy. And that eventually led to an opportunity with a digital marketing agency, still doing sales, but that did help bridge my experience and expertise into the marketing realm. I learned a lot about how apps and websites are developed and built firsthand, working with a lot of enterprise financial clients. And then I actually had a stint in higher ed, as you mentioned. And in higher ed, it was, higher ed is a very particular kind of beast. I was still in a sales and marketing role, but putting together custom education programs using the business school faculty at Northwestern to help train high potential employees, again, at big companies. And so as a vendor, a salesperson, and marketer, I've interacted with a lot of large companies, and so transitioning to smaller companies was something that I had to learn a little bit later or more recently. Fortunately, I have a background. My dad was an entrepreneur, and he took me to work with him as a young boy, starting from age 8, and I just thought he was the coolest, and still do. But then my wife started a business in 2016 that a photo studio, which I got to observe and support where I could, but just learn a lot from her journey as an entrepreneur, and just really have always been a fan of the entrepreneur, the small business owner, and it just feels like rooting for the underdog, and love to see these success stories and help wherever I can. So I'm pretty passionate about this space.
Well, I mean, that's quite a career journey, and quite a lot of different, ways that you've kind of experienced, business in general, like, entrepreneurship, and then coming from sales and moving to marketing. It's funny. I talk to so many people that have made the transition from sales to marketing, myself included, right? It's kind of it seems to be a pattern. There seems to be a lot of that.
Yeah.
Now, as you've gone through your career and these different, changes that you've had, when you hear the word attribution, how do you define it, and how has that changed over time as your roles have changed?
Yeah. Well, I think of it early on in sales. I was, we would have an adjacent marketing team, at a lot of these tech companies. It felt like the sales division was a lot larger than the marketing team. That it was more tactical. And so we'd occasionally have the marketing individual pass through and say, and ask us like, oh, can you give me some feedback on this big deal that's closing? And can we, what efforts can we attribute it to? Or, I was handed leads, and sometimes it would be from a conference or whatnot. And they would try to pin down, just by talking to us, what the lead source was, or the primary driver of the sale was. And for me as a salesperson, it was, I felt like I had a pretty good understanding. I was talking to this customer or potential customer a lot, and so I understood a lot about their need. And and they'd rehearse like, oh, I was searching for X, and I found you guys, or so-and-so referred me. And so I just make note, and I'd have some information direct from the client, just based on what they told me. And I thought it was interesting, and sometimes a little trivial. Like, I don't know why the marketing person cares. I'm doing all the work, and who cares where it came from? I'm going to close it. And, but then, of course, as I've moved up and working in more strategic roles, I start to realize that you really want to build something repeatable, a process that's repeatable, and you know where to spend your time and effort. Beyond the tactics of the salesman or the quality of the sales efforts, you do need to understand what is driving that initial contact, or getting to a salesperson. And that, never more than today do I really have to run a lot of experiments to figure out how, for different clients, for our own agency, how to figure out and I like to use the concept of the machine, the lead machine. Like, if I feed coins into a certain game machine, like that spits out tickets at random intervals, or based on a way I interact with it, I want to know which machine I need to feed the most to have the most leads produced, most sales produced. And because, and that's kind of how a marketer views it, is like, I want this machine to work, I want it calibrated correctly, and I want it spitting out the most output, sales, revenue, profit, whatever. But the salesperson is always just like, they're concentrated on their piece of the machine and making sure it's working efficiently. And the marketer gets to look a little bit more at a higher level. I think the marketer has a very challenging job, attribution, and you surely can attest to that. But just knowing that there's so many touches that a customer has to have with a brand or company or product before it becomes something tangible. And which of those touches was it? The most recent? Was it the first? What was the one that really triggered the sale?
So it sounds like, I mean, you're coming from a place where you originally said like, hey, I really even care about this because I'm
Right.
just a sales rep and
Yeah.
I'm going to close this deal. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Just give me those leads and I'm going to close them. And now you're more along the lines of like, yeah, no, we need to track this stuff to make really, really smart marketing decisions about where we're investing our money and where we're going to be, spending our time and energy and resources. I think the concept that you brought up of like marketing as a machine, I think there's something really interesting there. And I want to kind of like dig into that just a little bit. A lot of times you hear, and John Miller, former founder of Marketo, is one of the people that says this a lot, is that marketing has been kind of like devolved into a gumball machine. You put a quarter in, you get a lead. You put a quarter in, you get a lead. And that's really dangerous thinking. And I think that if we're going to think of marketing as a machine, I kind of like where you were going with like getting the tickets back. Cause I always think of like a skee ball machine, right? Like, like you put a quarter in, you get to throw 10 skee balls, and then you get however many tickets you get back is based on not just putting the quarter in. You don't get to put the quarter in and you get 10 tickets. Like you still have to actually like roll the ball up there, and there's skill involved, and you can throw the ball into the wrong damn machine on accident, right. Or you can miss everything entirely and end up with like maybe 2 tickets, versus if you're somebody that's really good at it, you put in a quarter and you get 20 tickets out because you've perfected this. I think that I like that we can distinguish between the gumball machine where it's just 1 quarter, 1 gumball, 1 quarter, 1 gumball, versus like ticket systems that involve that there's still a human element there. We still have to execute on our side. The quarter that we put in just gives us an opportunity to execute. Right. We're not guaranteed anything. We still have to execute.
Right.
I like that a lot. And I like that analogy and that framing.
Yeah. And to your point, it's not, I would go all the way to say it's like a slot machine where it's so many handle pulls, produces a jackpot, because I think that's also a mistaken psychology, because it implies that sales and marketing are luck. What you really need to do is you need to have a machine that can reliably produce if you perform. And, given that there's like human inconsistency and maybe some variables that, on the customer side that impact this, but provided that everything is working smoothly, that the inputs are there, you get enough like at bats, so to speak, that you're going to reliably produce sales at a certain level. And there's always time for optimization, skill enhancement, stronger tools. But if you think of it like that, then you can start thinking in terms of, well, if I increase my inputs, then in this way, and I've got the performers there, then then I can have certain expectations to forecast growth.
Oh yeah, and at the same time, like if I put another quarter in, that doesn't necessarily guarantee me 10 more tickets. I might get no tickets at all when I put that second quarter in. But again, that's because I failed. It's not because the quarter didn't do its job, right? Like the quarter gave me the ability to roll the balls up the thing, and I just didn't execute.
Right. But if you like reasonably increase the number, by significant number, you could plausibly see a consistent rate of increase.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Now, attribution needs are going to be vastly different between big tech and higher ed. What were some of the unique challenges that you had around reporting and measurement and attribution in the higher ed space?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So part of the issue was that there were so many touch points in the higher ed space, because we were frequently working with alumni of the university that were in some decision-making role. And I mean, that's like an infinite number of touch points that you say, like, did they see a newsletter or see a video on the Northwestern website that sparked the idea for this? Or was it just like a yearning to reconnect with the old campus? That made it very challenging. And the marketing content that was going out from the university was just constant. It was overlapping with requests for donations, requests to interview incoming students. And there were just so many touch points that it was really hard to figure out what was the good spend. And, we went through periods where we were putting a lot of dollars and effort into this kind of marketing effort. And times where we just paused ad spend, paused a lot of campaigns. And I think our observance primarily was that it was most highly correlated with the health of the economy, that this was somewhat of a luxury purchase. Often we would find some correlation between periods of low unemployment, where individuals would or companies would really want to use this as a retention tool for high performers, like a unique reward. And that was a great function of it. I have a lot of thoughts about higher ed, but one of the interesting things is that it's almost like a foolproof model, because in selling executive education, the companies essentially borrow prestige from the university that in return takes the company's money and payment. It's a very high margin item. And they use that money to enhance their facilities, hire end faculty, and self promote. And so it just kept growing and growing, and it continues. It's I don't know. I just had a lot of thoughts. It was like, this is almost too easy, and it's like a little little hack in the market, I guess, we just found that it was not that challenging to sell that. And in a way, the biggest constraint was the supply of faculty's time. So that's kind of an aside, but to paint a picture of how attribution worked, it was quite challenging.
Well, now, my experience in higher ed's fairly similar, because when I was in higher ed, what we were doing is we were spending a lot of time building partnerships with these corporations. Mm-hmm. And then once you build the partnership, then you actually have to then drive the enrollment into whatever the programs are.
Right.
So technically speaking, and this is what makes at least my experience in higher ed, and it sounds like yours was very similar, if not the exact same.
Right.
We had actually 2 attribution challenges to solve for. Because the first attribution challenge was the attribution challenge of getting the partnerships with the corporations. Because you have to market to these corporations to get them to say, yes, this sounds like a good idea. I want to sign up for this. And then 2, you have to then market within the organization to drive the actual, applications and registrations for the courses or the programs themselves. So you have 2 separate attribution challenges. One of them's getting the partnerships, the other is getting the registrations. Right. And that to me was a really unique challenge. The other thing that made that really uniquely challenging is because, and again, I don't know how you guys handled this at your higher ed institution, but we had a thing where in our CRM, we would use an opportunity to represent an enrollment, but it didn't have a dollar value attached to it, because ultimately enrollment in a program doesn't mean, if the program costs $30,000, doesn't mean you're going to collect $30,000. They may be in for one semester and then drop out. It's not right for them. Right. And you're not getting a $30,000 enrollment. You're getting a $5,000 enrollment. So we never had financial dollars and cents there to actually do like real ROI. because you
Right.
never really knew the actual ROI on the back end. You never knew the return on the back
Right.
end. You just knew the investment and the number of enrollments. And so that made it really challenging as well, because you couldn't do anything regarding ROI at all, period, end
Yeah.
of story, because we just didn't track it.
Yeah.
Did you guys have a similar kind of situation there?
We did. And I'll add a little finer point on this. We basically had split our our executive education into two buckets. So, as you'd mentioned, the individual enrollment, which we called the open enrollment, which was often subsidized by the corporation. Most of what I was talking about was the custom programs where the individual employees didn't have to pay. They were grouped into a group of like 30 or 40 and sent on the company's dime to our program. And so we, in that case, we had a single buyer for 40 versus a unique buyer for both. And so there's different attributions for each, and some of the and actually, so when it came to the what we call the custom, the group enrollments, those were more what I described in terms of like, we had a very hard time making that attribution. But the open enrollment, we had more information because these buyers were frequently coming in through a little bit more of a traditional route. Like they had Googled programs for certain causes. They were rarely alumni of the university, so they didn't have a particular relationship. And we had a better time being able to attribute the source in that, not always perfectly, but we could have a better identification. And we, like you said, the back end was a little bit mysterious in terms of the actual earnings from the program, because different faculty were paid different rates. And the way a university accounts is they spread costs where they need to, and they'll assign more costs to a higher performing part of the university. And so, we mostly looked at ROI in terms of the actual tuition, and that was where we had to live. We didn't get quite to the profitability and value by client.
So you even had different challenges than I had. Yeah. And which just kind of illustrates that every organization's got different challenges. Even within an industry where we're doing very, very similar things, there's still going to be like, oh no, I'm selling this, you're selling that. We got a different challenge over here.
Yeah.
Now, so now you've got even a different challenge with super, super small businesses.
Yes.
What are some of the attribution needs that you're, tackling now with the small businesses that you support?
Yeah. And like you said, in some ways it's easy, some ways it's harder than a larger organization. For one, the scale is much lower. The ad spend is lower. The number of salespeople is lower. They're attending fewer conferences. So there's fewer touch points, period, and fewer opportunities to get mixed up. Often word of mouth referrals go directly to the owner of the company, and it's pretty clear where that came from. A lot of the small businesses I work with invest in platforms that are like either influencer platforms or affiliate manager platforms. They'll create a custom link that rewards the referrer and channels the referral to a certain special price, special marketing automation. And that is very easy. I know that's open to large businesses, but I did not see that much in the large organizations that I worked with. I think that's much more characteristic of a company that kind of has to educate the market on their existence. It's a little bit divided, but depending on the nature of the business, a lot of the creatives that I work with, they do not do a lot of outbound sales efforts like cold calling or cold emailing. They rely on ads, words of mouth, referrals, primarily, to get the most draw. Others, like some of the home services businesses, they actually have a high degree. They will get mass lists of people by address, zip code, and dial like crazy. Now, in that situation, the attribution can be pretty easy because it might be the first time they've ever heard of the company, and you're direct to purchase right there on the phone. Single interaction. They caught the person at the right time when their pool needed cleaning, or they're overwhelmed by wasps or hornets, and they need the service now. So that makes it much easier. But there's also, I think, in every business I work with, there ads as a component. We'll see that the retargeting audiences they'll remind the people that didn't book, and they become another touch point. And it continues to make it challenging. So for the most part, we credit the human interaction in general where we can. There's bookers in the creative industry for photographers, and then there's outbound sales reps in the case of the like pest control and home services business. And using tags typically in a CRM has been our best tool, and for creating reports about where leads are being attributed.
A couple of interesting points that I want to talk about there. So number one is, obviously it's incredibly rare that you get single touch sales in Microsoft and Oracle.
Right.
Incredibly rare.
Right.
So you really don't have to worry about that too much. But also at the same time, like it's interesting because what you talked about is like affiliate marketing and influencer marketing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which is starting to become more and more prevalent in the B2B world. The Microsofts and the Oracles are starting to dip their toes in these waters as there's now more and more B2B marketing influencers out there. And so that presents, again, another new marketing attribution challenge, which is how do we track these influencers or these affiliates to make sure that they're getting the credit that they deserve? And we can understand, like, hey, when somebody is an influencer and they market this thing, and then 6 months down the road, an opportunity is created, and then 6 months down the road, we win the deal. Like, how do we make sure that we know that the influencer was a part of that journey, so that we can determine if influencer marketing is still something we should be doing or not? Yeah. In your world, that's a lot more easy because, again, you don't have as much time, right? Yeah, there's multiple touches, but that time lag is much shorter. So really interesting, just kind of, how we're starting to get more of the same stuff, but even then the attribution challenges are still very different because of time lag and number of touch points and things like that.
Absolutely. And you need to have, a good CRM database, I think is really helpful to everybody. But one thing you need to assure is that your front-end salespeople and marketers are using it as much as possible. And so you have as much functionality in there as possible, like task management and maybe even internal communications. Notes can be stored in there, because when they start using other systems, like they'll say like, oh, I keep a Google Sheet for notes on this contact. Well, it's like, no. It'd be better for everybody if you use the notes field in the CRM, or, I just keep a list, offline list of everybody that I got from this conference. And it's like, no, please keep it in the same place. And, when I worked at Oracle, they did a terrible job with making this CRM usable. And there was a huge disincentive because, in many situations as a salesperson, I would record, interesting calls that I had that seemed to push the sales forward. Other sales reps could see it, and they could potentially insert themselves into the conversation and say like, oh, well, you definitely don't want to buy middleware without additional database licenses. And they'd call the customer directly. And so there was this disincentive where I had to even kind of hoard data and protect it from other sales reps. So you have to make sure that the incentives are properly aligned, so everybody wants to put that data in the right place.
That's a brutal. That's
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah.
You'd have sales ripped out from underneath you by other people.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah. Well, it sometimes right, or, they could be right. But, the fact is that I felt like I was there first, and, but they would, or even if I came in and I had the correct product fit, but there was another rep that had another, another relationship, or a stronger relationship, in there, would just insert himself and say like, "Hey, I hear you're talking about this. I know we've done business for years together. Can we chat about, like, maybe discounting that product so we can get some more of your financial systems, get those beefed up?" And it's like, it was a little bit of cloak and dagger sometimes at a big company like Oracle.
so there's a really interesting point here that I want to talk about, and you just mentioned that there were certain incentives out there that would actually, because of these incentives within the organization, it would prevent you from logging a piece of data or marking a record in a certain way because of the incentives.
Yes.
And we run across this challenge a lot because organizations, and I'm going to give a really practical example here in the B2B world,
Mhm.
where organizations create incentive structures that incentivize the wrong behaviors instead of the right behaviors. A great example of this is when you have an organization where you give sales or SDRs or BDRs or whatever you call them an incentive to source their own records that turn into opportunities or pipeline. You give them an additional spiff in addition to their normal compensation for bringing in an opportunity or a deal. And we think that this is the right thing to do because we think that this is going to incentivize our teams that they have access to this incentive to do their own prospecting and to aggressively prospect. And what do we find happens? Not that. What we find happens is those folks take inbound leads, they create a duplicate record, say that they sourced it so that they can get the incentive. And now what they've done is they've broken the whole attribution chain. You now think that this was a prospected person and prospected deal when in reality it came from a conference 6 months ago. And a duplicate record was created to take advantage of that incentive. Organizations have to figure out, when we create these incentives, what are the downstream impacts going to be? Because I have seen so many times where organizations have these incentives that appear to be really smart and good ideas. But then when you look at what happens and the behaviors that become typical normal behaviors because of this incentive structure, it incentivizes people to do the absolute wrong things instead of incentivizing people to do the right things. So I think that's a really important lesson that our listeners should listen to is when you're thinking of building in incentives into your organization and building processes, you want to incentivize the right behaviors and disincentivize the wrong behaviors. And from a process perspective, you want to make it easy to do the right thing and make it hard to do the wrong thing.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And time and time again, I would observe it did feel like the trade-off a lot of times. So culturally, at least at that organization, Oracle, the culture was really focused on everybody was so self incentivized, to promote their own lane, that they would do it at the cost of potentially the organization. And, that like we would often, hold information back or, I was maybe more the recipient of, you received deceptive information from other sales representatives. We were competing within accounts, and it was not to the benefit of the account. But I do believe that Oracle management thought it was to the benefit of Oracle. And, maybe at a macro level they were right, but that was definitely just competition at all costs was the focus, and just trying to get every rep hungry. The commissions were good; they paid great commission, and that is just, maybe the trade-off that they wanted to make was just that overall at a macro level that made more sales. Maybe, I don't know, but they've been in business for about 50 years and
they're a juggernaut. So maybe it worked.
just had a huge deal a couple of weeks ago with OpenAI. So
I saw that. Yeah. Massive deal.
Yeah.
So now that you're a business owner, how has your perspective on attribution changed now that you're on kind of a different side of the fence, as somebody that is, the one that's approving all of the marketing expenditures and all of that? How has that perspective shifted your perspective on attribution?
Yeah, so some of the actions I've taken, when I joined I joined the company. I purchased the agency a couple of years ago, and it'd been in existence for about 3 years or 4 years before I'd purchased it, and I just observed that there was very little marketing activity happening. Not to criticize anybody, but there's a strong word of mouth, a steady flow of incoming accounts, which was great. And understandably, like if you have a good thing going, why mess with it? Well, of course I wanted to start growing even faster and adding more accounts. And so I introduced a lot of marketing efforts at once. We did ads, we worked on SEO to try to increase our organic ranking, joined a chamber of commerce. I attended webinars, it started mass cold email outbound, also did LinkedIn outbound and cold calling. And so I think I made the mistake of trying to start that all at once because I just wanted growth so badly. And that made it very challenging to, sort out the noise. And some people would comment on a social media post. I'd reach out to them and, they wouldn't respond. Then maybe I'd add them to our email newsletter, and months later, that could turn into a meeting. Now, in that case, what do I record as the source? And, our system just has been to tag everything, every activity. And, just, for now it's an equal share, and I'm not adding hundreds of clients a day or making hundreds of transactions a day. It's a few a month. And, which makes parsing really challenging when you have, small numbers to really get conclusions. Funny enough, though, is I found that the traditional marketing efforts, were not as effective as I would have experienced at some of my previous organizations, and that some of the best efforts I've undertaken have been even harder to quantify, which I've been generating a lot more content. And I started a podcast, made a big effort to guest on a lot of podcasts to get the backlinks, collaborate with bloggers and journalists. And but so what I have found though is that I have had elevated conversations with existing clients that will consider us for additional services when they see me as an educator, as a information sharer through these platforms, and collaborating with others. That seems to be the most effective channel for us. And so I can attribute a lot of like healthy conversations or upsell conversations. I can attribute those to something they saw in the newsletter or something I mentioned in a recent YouTube post. And, it can get specific because I'll do specific videos and, I'll see that they noted that. I'll note that in the CRM, and that, that's better information, but it is still challenging because it's one touch point among very, very many like support conversations and information emails they receive.
Yeah. So you're kind of doing the same thing that a lot of small businesses do, which is you're not really going deep into like multi-touch attribution and stuff like that because you're not at that level of complexity as an organization yet.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what we at Attributed do. Is it's funny because we're
Yeah.
a B2B multi-touch attribution special agency, right?
Yeah.
And we don't do it. And it's because every deal that comes in the door, I'm the one selling it. And
Right.
every marketing thing that goes out the door, I'm at least approving it. So I don't need complex because we're not that complex.
Right.
So yeah, I get it. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I wish it was. And I mean, I would welcome hundreds of transactions a month, and that would be so much more rich to draw conclusions on. But yeah, like as an agency, we work we're kind of bespoke and custom. And so just acknowledging the nature of that, that's how we're going to have, that's the quantity of data we're going to have. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what are some of the universal principles of marketing measurement that you found that apply no matter the size of the business, the industry, the vertical, the type of the business? What are those universal principles that you tell everybody, get this right and you'll be okay?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I might reframe this as you need to streamline your data collection. So as you said, make it very easy for this data about sales and transactions and activity and traffic. Make it very easy to aggregate, have in one place, and associate with like a single entry, whether it's in a CRM or whatever database you use. Make sure that all that activity can live there and if there's something missing, if there's touch points that are missing, figure out how to integrate that and associate it with the file, because often the big problem is if you're taking paper notes somewhere or you're pulling from data sources for leads, that are just outside of your system, you're just not going to, when it comes down to it, you're not going to, make those conclusions. And so, look for tools, whether it's like, like Looker Studio is a great resource through Google that you can pull data from multiple sources and make charts. For most use cases, it's free. So that's a great resource. And I know there's a lot of analytics platforms that I'm less familiar with, but I think are pretty easy to digest. And frankly, Chat GPT is doing a pretty good job at analyzing big data sources and combining. So that's the first thing I'd say. And then, I think you kind of brought this out, but I would agree that you want to make sure that your team is incentivized to collect this data and record it, that they don't keep it in their head, or they keep it on offline sources like their notepad. You want to make, like whether it's like just encouraging them to do that, requiring them to input notes, you need to make sure that they're actively doing that and that they feel that that's important. A good use case would be to make sure that they refer to the notes maybe when you're meeting with them about their deals and say, let's go through the notes and have them show you what they wrote down. I've used a nice tool with our CRM that does some AI analytics on the notes and the transcripts of the calls, which is really helpful. It helps them see what they're doing well and not, and it helps show like, are they pushing the sales at a higher rate, or are they holding sales down by poor conversation performance? So I would say, for me, those are the two things, because in a small business, it's not that you have a ton of data. It's almost that you have to really embrace and really monetize the data that you do have, and take advantage of every data point you can possibly get. Big organizations are drowning in data, and they have much more than they need. And but the small organization is like, you just need more information. And most small businesses have time to review almost every sales interaction, like the owner's management of the company. So that's something that they should be spending their time on.
Oh my gosh. Your last point of data collection within the team, like nothing terrifies me more than going into an organization and they're like, oh yeah, our sales reps like just keep all their contacts in an Excel spreadsheet. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I know, it's terrible.
This is gonna be a long, hard road to get you to be able to do any kind of attribution. Like that data's got to get into the CRM. Otherwise it is completely useless.
Right. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more on that one.
It's very prevalent. And if you don't have something that's nice to use, easy to use, or, if you've created any sort of barriers, it's like, it's so easy to do a Google sheet. It's just like that's the easiest thing in the world. So why would, I better get a return on my investment in going through the login and 10 clicks to get to the customer file. And, I better get some return on that.
Well, Reed, it is time for us to do our key takeaways here. So we are going to just walk through some of the things that I heard that I think are the key learnings and takeaways for the folks that are listening here today. So number one is that marketing is a machine, but it's not a gumball machine. There's still a human element that we have to account for. That is the execution behind the quarter. The quarter gives us the opportunity to execute. How we execute determines how many tickets we get out of the machine. There's no even exchange. It's not drop a quarter, get a gumball. That does not work that way.
Right.
Centralized technology, particularly like in a CRM, is essential for reporting and analytics success and attribution success. The data has got to be in the right place. We just talked about that. Especially as we are launching and testing new strategies, we have to make sure that the data is in the CRM and that it's clean and accurate. Incentives. We have got to focus on incentivizing the right behaviors and not the wrong behaviors. Make it easy to do the right thing, make it hard to do the wrong thing. And when we have an incentive that we think is going to be a good, smart incentive, we have to think downstream 6 months from now. What are people going to be doing to maximize their takeaway from this incentive? Particularly if it's a financial incentive, because people will do crazy things to get paid more. They just will.
Yes, they will.
So those are the big ones. So Reed, thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure. It's been great meeting you and great speaking with you. So thanks for joining, Reed.
Thanks so much, Drew. It's been a pleasure. I think our conversation helped me refine a few ideas I had bounced around my head and very valuable to me. Thank you.
I love that. That's awesome. That's not only am I learning, not only are our listeners learning, but Reed's learning while he's on the podcast as well.
Absolutely. Love it.
That is fantastic. That's the goal. Everybody wins. All right. Well, to our listeners, thank you so much for sticking around for the entire episode. Like us, share us, subscribe to us, help us spread the word. And then again, lastly, Reed, thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure as well. Thank you.